Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Jack Riker stood at the kitchen window, watching the driveway. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he couldn't move away from his post. Something twisted in his gut every time Landon spent weekends at Miriam's house. Today felt different. Worse, the black sedan pulled up at exactly 6 p.m. Through the windshield, Jack caught sight of his mother-in-law's rigid posture, her hands gripping the steering wheel like she was strangling it. Landon sat in the passenger seat, smaller than usual. Jack opened the front door before they reached the porch. "Hey, buddy." Landon looked up, and Jack's blood turned to ice. A purple bruise spread across the boy's left cheek, like spilled ink. His lower lip was split, a thin line of dried blood marking where it had healed wrong. What happened? Jack dropped to one knee, his hands hovering near his son's face. "I fell." Landon's voice came out as a whisper. His eyes darted toward the car where Miriam waited, engine running. "You fell." Jack's teacher instincts kicked in. He'd seen enough playground accidents to know what they looked like. This wasn't one. "Where did you fall, Landon?" "Down the stairs." The boy's whole body trembled. "I was running, and I fell down the stairs." Jack's eyes moved to Miriam's car. She sat perfectly still, watching them through the windshield. When their eyes met, she offered a thin smile and a small wave, as if nothing had happened. "Get inside, son." Jack's voice came out harder than he intended. Landon flinched. "I'm sorry. I'm not mad at you. Just go inside and wash up for dinner." Landon hurried through the door. Jack walked to the car and tapped on the driver's window. Miriam rolled it down halfway. What happened to his face? "Boys will be boys, Jack. He was playing too rough and took a tumble." Her voice carried that practiced sweetness that made his skin crawl. "You worry too much. He's 8 years old." "Exactly. 8-year-olds fall down. It's what they do." She shifted the car into drive. "Tell Nora I'll call her tomorrow about next weekend." The window rolled up. The car pulled away. Jack stood in the driveway until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Inside, he found Landon at the bathroom sink, splashing cold water on his face with careful, deliberate movements that seemed too practiced for a child. "Does it hurt?" Landon met his eyes in the mirror. "A little." Jack knelt beside him. "Tell me what really happened." "I fell." The boy's voice got smaller. "I was running and I fell." "Landon, look at me." Jack waited until his son turned around. "You can tell me anything. You know that, right?" The boy nodded, but his eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. "Where's Mom?" Landon asked. "She had to work late. It's just us for dinner." Jack stood up. "How about we order pizza?" For the first time since coming home, Landon smiled. "Can we get extra cheese?" "We can get whatever you want." Nora came home at 9:30. Her heels clicking against the hardwood as she set down her purse and keys with mechanical precision. Jack had been waiting in the living room, turning over what he'd say, how he'd approach this. Now that she was here, the words felt stuck in his throat. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking at him as she sorted through the mail. Landon came home with a split lip and a bruise on his cheek. She paused for half a second, then continued flipping through envelopes. "Kids get hurt. It happens. Nora, look at me." She turned, her expression blank and distant. She'd perfected that look over the years, the one that made him feel like he was talking to a stranger. "Your mother said he fell down the stairs. Then he fell down the stairs." She shrugged. "He always plays rough when he's there. You know how boys are." Jack stood up slowly. "He's afraid to tell me what really happened." "He told you what happened." "He fell." Her voice carried a note of irritation, like he was being unreasonable. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" "Because when I taught school, I learned to recognize the difference between playground accidents and..." "And what?" Her eyes flashed with something cold. "What are you suggesting, Jack?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking you to look at your son's face and tell me that looks like he fell downstairs." Nora walked past him toward the kitchen. "He's fine. He's upstairs playing video games like nothing happened. You're the one making this into a crisis." Jack followed her. "He's 8 years old, Nora. 8. And he came home looking like someone hit him." She spun around so fast it startled him. "My mother would never hurt Landon. How dare you even think that?" I never said your mother hurt him. You didn't have to. She grabbed a water glass from the cabinet, her movements sharp and angry. You've never liked her. You've been looking for an excuse to keep Landon away from her since the day he was born. That's not true, isn't it? She filled the glass and took a long drink, studying him over the rim. You think I don't see how you act when she's around? The way you watch her like she's some kind of criminal. Jack felt his chest tighten. I watch her because she treats people like garbage, including you. She raised me. She loves Landon. Love doesn't leave bruises. The glass slammed down on the counter hard enough to crack. Enough. I won't listen to you attack my family. What about your son? Isn't he your family too? Nora walked out of the kitchen without answering. A minute later, Jack heard their bedroom door close. Then the lock clicked that he stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the cracked glass on the counter, and realized he'd been having this fight for 8 years. Tonight was just the first time he'd said it out loud. Jack called in sick the next morning. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night listening to Landon toss and turn in the room next door. When morning came, the bruise had darkened to deep purple, and the split lip looked worse in daylight. We're going to see Dr. Matthews, Jack announced over breakfast. I don't want to go to the doctor. Landon pushed cereal around his bowl. I'm fine. I want her to look at your face. Make sure everything's okay. Mom said I don't need to go. Jack paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. When did Mom say that? This morning, before she left for work. Landon wouldn't meet his eyes. She said falling down is normal and doctors cost money. Jack set his cup down carefully. Well, I think we should go anyway, just to be safe. Dr. Matthews had been Landon's pediatrician since birth. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, the type who made children feel safe. When she saw Landon's face, those kind eyes turned sharp and focused. Let's take a look at you, buddy. She knelt to Landon's height. Can you tell me how this happened? I fell down the stairs at Grandma's house. That must have hurt. She touched the area around the bruise with careful fingers. Did you hit your head when you fell? I don't think so. Any other bumps or bruises? Sometimes when we fall, we hurt ourselves in more than one place. Landon shook his head quickly. Too quickly, doctor. Matthew stood and walked to her desk, making notes. Landon, would you mind sitting in the waiting room for a few minutes? I want to talk to your dad about making sure you heal up properly. After Landon left, she closed the door and turned to Jack. Her expression had changed completely. This isn't consistent with a fall downstairs. Jack's stomach dropped. What do you mean? The bruising pattern is wrong. When children fall downstairs, they typically have multiple impact points, knees, elbows, maybe their shoulder or hip. Landon has a single, concentrated bruise on his cheek and a split lip. That's consistent with being struck across the face. The room felt like it was spinning. Are you sure? I've been doing this for 20 years, Mr. Riker. I've seen every type of childhood injury you can imagine. She sat down across from him. Someone hit your son? And based on his behavior, it wasn't the first time. What do you mean his behavior? He won't make eye contact. He's hyper-vigilant, watching every movement I make, every expression on my face. He's checking to see if he's in trouble. That's not normal for a child who simply had an accident. Jack gripped the arms of his chair. What do I do? You need to keep him away from whoever did this. And you need to document everything. Take pictures. Keep records. If this escalates, you'll need evidence. It won't escalate. Jack's voice came out hard and flat. I'll make sure of that. Dr. Matthews leaned forward. Mr. Riker, I have to ask, is there any chance your wife is aware of what's happening? She says he fell. And do you believe that? Jack looked through the office window, where Landon sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine without reading it. His son looked small and fragile and scared. No, he said quietly. I don't believe that at all. That evening, Jack helped Landon with his homework at the kitchen table. Math problems and spelling words, the normal routine that felt anything but normal now. Nora worked late again, which had become her pattern whenever there was something she didn't want to discuss. Dad, Landon looked up from his worksheet. Can I ask you something? Always. If someone tells you not to say something, do you have to listen? Jack set down the pencil he'd been grading with. That depends. What kind of something? Like if someone says don't tell your dad about something that happened. Every muscle in Jack's body went tight. Who said that to you? Landon's eyes went wide, like he'd said too much. Nobody. I was just wondering. Landon, if someone told you not to tell me something, I want to know about it. It's my job to protect you, and I can't do that if I don't know what's happening. But what if they get mad? At you? Or at me? At me. For telling. Jack moved his chair closer to his son's. Listen to me very carefully. No adult should ever tell you to keep secrets from your parents. If someone says don't tell your dad or don't tell your mom, that usually means they're doing something wrong. Landon nodded slowly, but he still looked scared. Who told you not to tell me something? I can't say. Yes, you can. I promise you won't get in trouble. Landon stared at his math homework for a long time. Then, in a voice so quiet Jack had to lean in to hear it, Grandma Miriam. Jack's vision went red around the edges. What did she tell you not to tell me? That she, Landon's voice broke, that she got mad at me for spilling juice on her carpet. She said I was clumsy and stupid, and then she pushed me really hard and I hit the coffee table. She pushed you, with both hands, right on my chest. I fell backward and my face hit the corner of the table. Tears started rolling down Landon's cheeks. She said if I told you, you'd get mad at me for being clumsy, and you might not want me to live with you anymore. Jack felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart that had been cracking for months. Something deeper. Something that had been holding him back. Landon, look at me. He waited until his son's eyes met his. I will never, ever get mad at you for someone else hurting you. And I will never, ever stop wanting you to live with me. You are the most important thing in my entire world. Really, really. And Grandma Miriam was wrong to tell you not to tell me. Adults who love children don't hurt them, and they don't make them keep secrets. That night, after Landon went to bed, Jack sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He typed divorce attorney into the search bar and started making a list. Later, while organizing Landon's backpack for school, he found a piece of paper folded up in the bottom pocket. Jack unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing done in crayon. A tall woman with angry, dark eyes loomed over a small boy who was cowering on the ground. The woman's mouth was open, showing jagged teeth. The boy's face was covered with purple scribbles at the bottom, in Landon's careful second-grade handwriting. Don't tell Daddy. Jack stared at the drawing until his hand started shaking. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer. Evidence that he slept in the chair outside Landon's bedroom that night, watching the door, making sure nothing could get through it. Every few hours, he checked on his son, who slept fitfully, sometimes whimpering in his dreams. Jack didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Jack called the first attorney on his list. Margaret Santos had been practicing family law for 15 years, and her voice on the phone was crisp and professional. I need to file for divorce, Jack said without preamble when she answered. I see. Are there children involved? One son, 8 years old. And I want full custody. Mr. Riker, full custody is difficult to obtain unless there are extenuating circumstances. There are. Jack pulled out the drawing and Dr. Matthews' notes. My mother-in-law is physically abusing my son, and my wife is either helping her cover it up or refusing to protect him. There was a pause. Can you be here at 2 o'clock today? Yes. Bring everything. Documents, photos, any evidence you have. And Mr. Riker, yes, don't discuss this with your wife until we've filed the papers. Once we start this process, it's going to get ugly fast. Jack hung up and looked at the clock. Nora had already left for work. Landon was at school. He had 6 hours to prepare for war. The Team Margaret Santos office. Jack spread everything across her conference table. Dr. Matthews' notes. Photos he'd taken of Landon's injuries. The drawing. His written account of every conversation, every red flag, every moment he should have acted sooner. Margaret studied each piece with the focus of a detective. She was younger than Jack had expected, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. This is serious, she said finally. Your mother-in-law's behavior constitutes child abuse. Your wife's failure to protect your son could be considered neglect. What are my chances of getting full custody? With this evidence? Very good. But I need to warn you your wife's going to fight back hard. She'll probably claim you're unstable, controlling, maybe even dangerous. They'll dig into every aspect of your life, looking for ammunition. Jack thought about that. I've been a teacher for 12 years. No disciplinary actions, no complaints. I coach Little League on weekends. I volunteer at the food bank during holidays. Good. That helps. Margaret made notes. What about your wife? What's her background? Marketing executive. Works long hours. Travels sometimes for conferences. Jack paused. She's never been physically abusive toward Landon, but she's emotionally distant. Always has been. And she knows about the abuse. She has too. Landon came home with obvious injuries, and she brushed it off like it was nothing. She defended her mother without even asking what happened. Margaret nodded. We'll file an emergency motion for temporary full custody based on the abuse allegations. We'll also request a restraining order preventing your mother-in-law from having any contact with your son. How long will this take? The emergency hearing should happen within a few days. The actual divorce will take longer, but protecting your son is the priority. She looked at him seriously. Are you prepared for how your wife is going to react? Jack thought about Nora's cold eyes when he tried to talk to her about Landon's injuries. The way she'd chosen her mother over their son without hesitation. I've been preparing for 8 years, he said. I just didn't know it. That evening, Jack served Nora with the divorce papers in their living room. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when he placed the envelope on the coffee table in front of her. What's this? Divorce papers. I'm filing for full custody of Landon. She opened the envelope and read the first page. Her face went white, then red, then something Jack had never seen before. Pure rage. You bastard. She stood up so fast the paper scattered. You're actually trying to take my son away from me. I'm trying to protect him. From what? From me? From my mother? She laughed, but it sounded broken. You've lost your mind. Your mother abused our son, Nora. She pushed him into a coffee table and told him to lie about it. And you knew. I knew nothing. You knew he was hurt. You knew he was scared. And you chose to protect her instead of him. Nora's hands shook as she picked up the papers. I'll fight this. I'll fight you. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. Jack looked at her, and realized he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. The woman he'd married had disappeared so gradually he hadn't noticed when the stranger took her place. I already do, he said quietly. I regret waiting this long. The next morning brought chaos. Jack had barely finished his coffee when the doorbell rang. A process server stood on his porch with a thick envelope. Jack Riker. Yes, you've been served. Inside were counter-divorce papers and a motion for shared custody. Nora had hired Coleman, Bradley & Associates, one of the most expensive family law firms in the state. Their letterhead alone probably cost more than Jack's monthly salary. His phone buzzed. Margaret Santos. They work fast, she said without greeting. Have you read it? Reading it now. Jack scanned the documents, his anger building with each line. They're claiming I'm emotionally volatile and controlling. Standard strategy. They're trying to paint you as the unstable parent. Look at page 4. Jack flipped to page 4 and felt his blood pressure spike. A character reference letter from Miriam Dunley, describing Jack as hostile and aggressive toward family members and expressing grave concerns about his mental state. This is unbelievable. It gets worse. They're requesting an immediate psychiatric evaluation for you and claiming you've been coaching Landon to make false allegations. Jack sank into his kitchen chair. Can they do that? They can request it. The judge will decide if it's warranted. Margaret's voice stayed calm and professional. Don't panic. We knew they'd fight dirty. The evidence is on our side. What about the emergency custody hearing? Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Judge Patricia Hawkins. She's fair but thorough. She'll want to hear from Landon directly. After hanging up, Jack called in sick again and spent the morning preparing. He printed copies of everything, organized his evidence, and practiced his testimony. At noon, his phone rang. Nora, I want to see my son. He's at school. I'll pick him up early. No. The word came out harder than Jack intended. The emergency custody order is in effect. He stays with me until the hearing. You can't keep me from my own child. I'm not keeping you from him. I'm keeping him safe. There was a long pause. When Nora spoke again, her voice had changed. Softer, more vulnerable than he'd heard in years. Jack, please. Can we talk about this? Really talk. We're past talking. I know you think I don't care about Landon, but you're wrong. He's my son, too. Then act like it. The line went quiet for so long Jack thought she'd hung up. Finally, I'm fighting for him. You're fighting for your mother. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you chose Landon over Miriam? When's the last time you put his needs first? Silence again. I'll see you in court, Nora said, and hung up. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and tall windows. Jack arrived early, dressed in his best suit, carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Margaret met him in the hallway. Remember, answer only what they ask. Don't volunteer information. If you don't understand a question, ask for clarification. Nora sat at the opposing table with her attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Coleman who looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. She wore a navy blue dress that made her look professional and maternal. Jack wondered if that was intentional. Judge Hawkins was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked like someone's grandmother, but her voice carried absolute authority. This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary custody of Landon Riker, age 8. Mr. Riker, you filed for emergency full custody based on allegations of abuse. Present your case. Margaret stood. Your Honor, we have substantial evidence that the child has been physically abused by his maternal grandmother, Miriam Dumley, with the knowledge and complicity of his mother, Nora Riker. She presented Dr. Matthews' medical report, the photos of Landon's injuries, and the drawing. Judge Hawkins studied each piece carefully. Mr. Coleman, your response? Richard Coleman stood with practiced ease. Your Honor, my client denies these allegations completely. Mr. Riker has a history of hostility toward his mother-in-law and has been looking for reasons to limit her contact with the child. These injuries are consistent with normal childhood accidents, and the drawing is the product of an 8-year-old's imagination, possibly influenced by his father's coaching. Do you have evidence of this coaching? We have character witnesses who will testify to Mr. Riker's controlling behavior and his attempts to isolate his family from their support system. Judge Hawkins made notes. I want to interview the child in chambers. Both attorneys present, parents excluded. 20 minutes later, they brought Landon back. Jack could see his son through the glass window of the judge's chambers, sitting in a chair that made him look even smaller than usual. His heart broke watching Landon answer questions, seeing him struggle with whether to tell the truth. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Hawkins looked grim. Based on the medical evidence and my interview with the child, I'm granting temporary full physical custody to Jack Riker. Nora Riker will have supervised visitation twice weekly, pending family therapy and a full custody evaluation. Jack felt his knees go weak with relief. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Miriam Dumley from having any contact with a minor child until this matter is resolved. Coleman stood immediately. Your Honor, we request an expedited hearing for the full custody determination. Granted, 30 days from today. Judge Hawkins banged her gavel. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Nora confronted Jack in the parking lot. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You think you've won something here? Her voice cracked. You've destroyed our family. Our family was destroyed the first time you chose your mother over our son. She stared at him with tears in her eyes. For a moment, Jack saw the woman he'd married, the one he'd loved. Then her expression hardened. I'll get him back, Jack. Whatever it takes. That night, after Landon was asleep, Jack sat in a study with a glass of whiskey and a box of photo albums. He needed to understand how they'd gotten here when everything had started going wrong. The early photos showed a different couple. Young, happy, hopeful. Their wedding day, Nora looked radiant in white, and Jack couldn't take his eyes off her. Even then, though, Miriam dominated the frame in every family photo, positioned front and center like a queen holding court. He found the album from Landon's first year. Page after page of baby photos, but something was wrong. In every picture that included Miriam, Nora looked tense, almost afraid. Jack had thought it was new mother nerves at the time. Now he wondered. There was a photo from Landon's first birthday party. Miriam held the baby while Nora stood nearby, hands reaching out like she wanted to take him back. In the background, Jack could see himself talking to his father-in-law, oblivious to the tension that he remembered that day more clearly now. Miriam had criticized everything. The cake was too sweet, the decorations were cheap, the music was too loud. When Landon started crying, she'd taken him from Nora's arms and declared that the party was overstimulating the poor child. Jack had watched Nora's face crumple, but when he'd tried to comfort her later, she'd insisted everything was fine. "That's just how she talks," she'd said. That phrase echoed through their marriage. When Miriam insulted Jack's cooking at Thanksgiving dinner, when she criticized their house, their car, their parenting choices, when she made snide comments about Jack's salary or his family background, that's just how she talks. She doesn't mean anything by it. You're being too sensitive. Jack flipped through more pages, watching his own face change over the years. He looked increasingly distant in family photos, standing apart from Miriam's orbit. In the recent pictures, Nora rarely smiled unless her mother was out of frame. He found a photo from last Christmas. Landon was opening presents while Miriam watched with a critical expression. In the background, Nora looked exhausted, like she was bracing for criticism. Jack was nowhere to be seen, probably in the kitchen, finding excuses to avoid the living room. Looking at these photos, Jack realized the signs had been there all along. He'd just been too focused on keeping peace to see them clearly. Every time Nora chose her mother's approval over their family's happiness. Every time she dismissed his concerns to avoid confrontation. Every time she prioritized Miriam's feelings over Landon's safety. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. Jack closed the albums and poured another whiskey. Tomorrow he'd start documenting everything he could remember. Every incident, every red flag, every moment he should have spoken up. The custody evaluation would be thorough, and he needed to be prepared. But tonight, he let himself grieve for the marriage he'd thought he had, and the woman he'd thought he'd married. 2 days later, Jack sat across from Felix Garth at a coffee shop downtown. Felix had been his roommate in college, back when they were both idealistic education majors who thought they could change the world. Now Felix worked for Child Protective Services, and his idealism had been tempered by reality. "You sure about this?" Felix kept his voice low, even though they were alone in the corner booth. "She's going to keep seeing him during supervised visits. If she says anything threatening or inappropriate, I need evidence." Felix examined the small digital recorder Jack had brought. "It's legal as long as one party consents to the recording. Since it's your kid, you can consent for him. Will it hold up in court? If it's relevant to his safety, yes." Felix handed the device back. "But Jack, be careful. If they find out about this, and the kid hasn't been threatened, it could backfire. They'll claim you're coaching him or violating the mother's privacy. I'm not going to tell him to provoke anything. I just want to know what happens when I'm not there." Felix studied his friend's face. "You really think she's going to say something incriminating?" "I think when people are under pressure, they show their true colors. And Nora's been under a lot of pressure since the restraining order." That evening, Jack sat on Landon's bed and showed him the small recording device. It looked like a thick pen designed to be unobtrusive. "What's this for?" "I want you to keep this in your pocket when you visit Mom. If she says anything that makes you uncomfortable, or if anyone tells you to keep secrets, I want to know about it." Landon turned the device over in his hands. "Will I get in trouble?" "No, this isn't about getting anyone in trouble. It's about making sure you're safe. What if Mom finds it?" "She won't, as long as you keep it in your pocket." "And Landon, you don't have to tell her about it. Sometimes adults need to have private conversations with their kids, just like kids sometimes need to talk privately with their parents. Like when Grandma told me not to tell you things. Exactly like that. Except this time, if someone tells you to keep secrets, I'll know about it, and I can help." Landon nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, he was already learning to navigate a world where adults couldn't be trusted completely. Jack hated that his son had to grow up so fast, but he hated the alternative more. The first supervised visit was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at a family visitation center. Jack would drop Landon off and pick him up 2 hours later. A trained supervisor would monitor the entire interaction. Saturday morning, Jack helped Landon get ready. The recording device went into the front pocket of the boy's jeans, where it would be hidden but easily accessible. "Remember, just have a normal visit with Mom. Don't try to make anything happen. Just be yourself. What if she asks about the court stuff? Tell her you don't understand all the adult things that are happening. Which is true. Jack knelt down to Landon's eye level. Are you okay with this? If you don't want to do the recording, we don't have to. Landon thought about it seriously. I want to do it. I want you to know what really happens. Jack paced the hallway outside the visitation center for 2 hours, checking his watch every few minutes. When the door finally opened, Landon walked out looking subdued but not upset. He handed Jack the recording device without a word. "I in the car?" Jack asked. "How did it go?" "Okay, I guess." Mom seemed sad. "Did you talk about anything important?" "She asked a lot of questions about living with you. And she said some things about Grandma Miriam." Jack's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice casual. "What kind of things?" "She said Grandma's really upset about not seeing me, and that maybe the judge made a mistake." That night, after Landon was asleep, Jack listened to the recording with headphones. For the first hour, it was mostly normal conversation. Nora asked about school, about his friends, about what he'd been doing with Jack. She sounded tired and strained, but not inappropriate. Then about an hour and 20 minutes in, Jack heard Nora's voice change. "Landon, I need you to understand something. Your dad is very angry right now, and he's trying to keep you away from people who love you. Like Grandma Miriam." "Yes, like Grandma. She loves you so much, and she's heartbroken that she can't see you. But she hurt me, Mom." There was a long pause. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're upset. That doesn't mean they don't love you. Dad says adults who love kids don't hurt them. Your dad says a lot of things, honey, but he's very angry right now, and angry people don't always think clearly." Jack felt his jaw clench. She was undermining him, making him the villain. The recording continued. "Grandma Miriam wants you to know that she's sorry if you got hurt, but she also wants you to know that your dad is going to try to keep you away from our family. He might even try to take you somewhere far away where we can't find you." Jack stopped the recording and rewound it. Had she really just told an 8-year-old that his father might kidnap him? "He's going to leave you like he left your mom," Nora's voice continued. "That's what he does when things get hard. He runs away." Jack's hand started shaking. She was filling their son's head with lies and fears, poisoning him against his own father. The next morning, Jack called Felix and played him the relevant portion of the recording. "Jesus, Jack, she's trying to alienate your kid against you. Is it enough for court? More than enough. This is parental alienation, and it's taken very seriously by family courts. She's also making the kid afraid that you're going to abandon him." "What about the part where she said Miriam was sorry if he got hurt? Like it was still an accident?" "That's huge. She's minimizing confirmed abuse and trying to convince the kid it wasn't really abuse. Any judge is going to see this as putting the abuser's feelings above the child's safety." Jack saved multiple copies of the recording and sent one to Margaret. Within an hour, she called back. "That's your smoking gun," she said. "We're filing this with the court immediately." Margaret had arranged to meet with all of Jack's potential witnesses at her office the following Tuesday. Jack arrived to find Felix already there, along with 2 people he hadn't expected to see. Junie Vale sat near the window, looking nervous but determined. She'd been Landon's school counselor for 2 years, and Jack had always appreciated her gentle way with the kids. Beside her sat a woman Jack didn't recognize at first. "Jack, you remember Tegan Blair," Margaret said. She reached out after hearing about the case. It took Jack a moment to place her. Tegan had been Nora's best friend in elementary school, but they'd drifted apart in high school. Jack had met her briefly at their wedding, but hadn't seen her since. "I heard through mutual friends about what's happening," Tegan explained. "I needed to come forward." Margaret gestured for everyone to sit around the conference table. "Tegan has some important information about Miriam's history of abuse." Tegan's hand shook as she spoke. "Nora and I were best friends from kindergarten through 6th grade. I spent a lot of time at her house." She paused, gathering courage. "When we were 11, we were playing in Nora's room, and I accidentally knocked over a glass of grape juice. It spilled on this white dress that Miriam had bought for Nora to wear to some family event." Jack felt his stomach tighten. "Miriam came upstairs and saw the stain. She started screaming at me, calling me clumsy and careless. Then Tegan's voice broke. She slapped me across the face. Hard. Hard enough that my ear rang for hours. What did Nora do? Margaret asked gently. Nothing. She just stood there and watched. When Miriam left the room, I was crying, and I asked Nora why she didn't say anything. She told me to stop crying because I'd only make her mother angrier. Did you tell your parents? I tried to. But Miriam called my mother that same day and told her I'd been destructive and disrespectful in their home. She made it sound like I was a problem child. My mother believed her. Jack found his voice. How long did this go on? Years. Anytime I made the smallest mistake at their house, Miriam would find a way to humiliate me. She'd criticize my clothes, my hair, my manners. She'd make comments about my family not having enough money to teach me proper behavior. And Nora never defended you. Tegan shook her head. She was terrified of her mother. We all were. But the difference was I could go home. Nora lived with her. Junie spoke up for the first time. This matches what I've observed at school. Landon shows classic signs of a child walking on eggshells. He's hypervigilant, constantly checking adult faces for signs of anger or disapproval. Can you be more specific? Margaret asked. He apologizes for everything, even things that aren't his fault. If he drops a pencil, he immediately says sorry and looks around to see if anyone's upset. When other kids are loud or playful, he gets anxious, like he's expecting someone to get in trouble. Felix nodded. I've seen the same patterns in abused children. They become hyper-responsible for everyone else's emotions. Margaret made notes. Tegan, would you be willing to testify about your experiences with Miriam? Yes. I should have spoken up years ago. Maybe if I had. This isn't your fault, Jack said firmly. You were a child too. I know, but I've carried this guilt for 20 years. When I heard what was happening to Landon, I knew I had to do something. After the others left, Margaret and Jack reviewed their strategy. Between the medical evidence, the recording, and these witness testimonies, we have a very strong case, she said. But I need to warn you again, they're going to come at you hard. Coleman's known for character assassination. What kind of character assassination? They'll try to find anything in your past that makes you look unstable or unreliable. Ex-girlfriends who might say you were controlling. Colleagues who might remember you losing your temper. Students or parents who filed complaints. Jack thought about his 12-year teaching career. There was one incident. A parent accused me of being too harsh with her son because I gave him detention for cheating. She filed a complaint with the school board. What happened? The principal and department head both defended me. The complaint was dismissed. The kid was definitely cheating, and detention was the standard consequence. That's minor. Anything else? Jack searched his memory. In college, I got arrested at a party where there was underage drinking. I wasn't drinking, but I was there when the cops came. Charges were dropped. Even better, it shows you weren't actually drinking. Margaret made more notes. What about your relationship with Nora? Any incidents where you might have seemed controlling or aggressive? Jack thought about all the fights they'd had over the years. I pushed back whenever Miriam crossed lines, but I never threatened anyone or got physical. The worst thing I ever did was raise my voice. Good. And your teaching record is clean otherwise. Perfect attendance, good evaluations, parent and student letters of recommendation. I was teacher of the year twice. Margaret smiled for the first time all day. Jack, I think we're going to win this. The courtroom was packed on the day of the final custody hearing. Jack sat next to Margaret, watching Nora and Coleman arrange their files at the opposing table. Behind them, he could see several people he didn't recognize character witnesses. No doubt. Judge Hawkins called the court to order. This is the final custody hearing for Landon Riker. We'll hear evidence from both sides before making a determination on permanent custody arrangements. Coleman went first, calling a parade of witnesses who painted Jack as an unstable, controlling husband. Nora's co-workers testified that she'd seemed afraid of Jack's temper. A neighbor claimed Jack had been hostile when they tried to discuss property line disputes. Even Miriam took the stand, describing Jack as violently angry and claiming she feared for her daughter's safety. Jack forced himself to stay calm, remembering Margaret's advice. Let them have their show. The evidence would speak for itself. When it was Margaret's turn, she started with Dr. Matthews, who calmly explained the medical evidence of abuse. The pediatrician's testimony was clinical but devastating, describing injury patterns that could only result from intentional violence. Felix testified about Landon's psychological state, explaining how the boy's behavior matched classic abuse patterns. Junie described the changes she'd observed in Landon over the past year, how a confident child had become anxious and withdrawn. Then Margaret called Tegan to the stand. "Ms. Blair, please describe your relationship with the defendant's family." "I was Nora Riker's best friend from childhood until we were 12 years old." "What ended that friendship?" Tegan took a deep breath. "Miriam Dunley's abuse became too severe for me to handle." Coleman objected, but Judge Hawkins allowed the testimony. Tegan described years of psychological and physical abuse, painting a picture of a household ruled by fear and intimidation. "Did Nora ever intervene when her mother abused you?" "Never. She was too afraid." But the real moment came when Margaret introduced the recording. Jack watched the courtroom fall silent as Nora's voice filled the room, telling their 8-year-old son that his father might abandon him like he'd abandoned her. When the recording ended, several jurors were visibly upset. Judge Hawkins looked grim. "Ms. Riker," the judge said, "do you have any explanation for these statements?" Nora stood shakily. "I was upset, Your Honor. I said things I shouldn't have said. You told your son that his father might kidnap him. You minimized confirmed abuse by saying your mother was sorry if he got hurt. Do you understand how these statements could harm your child?" I was trying to help him understand that families are complicated by making him afraid of his own father." Nora had no answer. Coleman tried to salvage the situation during redirect, but the damage was done. The recording had revealed not just poor judgment, but active psychological manipulation of a child. Judge Hawkins looked at Jack. "Mr. Riker, since you're representing yourself in this custody matter, you have the right to cross-examine witnesses. Do you wish to question Mrs. Dunley?" Jack stood slowly. Margaret had coached him on this moment, but his hands still shook as he approached Miriam on the witness stand. "Mrs. Dunley, you testified that you've never harmed Landon. Is that still your testimony?" Miriam looked at him with barely concealed hatred. "That's correct. And you stated that his injuries were the result of normal childhood accidents." "Yes." Jack walked to the evidence table and picked up Landon's drawing, the one showing a tall woman with angry eyes looming over a cowering boy. "Do you recognize this drawing?" Miriam glanced at it dismissively. "Children draw all sorts of things. This is a drawing your grandson made after spending a weekend at your house. The caption reads, 'Don't tell Daddy.' Did you tell Landon not to tell his father about something that happened at your house?" "I don't recall." Jack felt his anger building, but he kept his voice steady. "You don't recall telling an 8-year-old child to keep secrets from his parent? Children misunderstand things." "Mrs. Dunley, why would Landon need to keep secrets about falling downstairs?" "I don't know what you mean. If he simply fell downstairs, as you claim, why would you tell him not to tell his father about it? What would be the harm in his father knowing about an accident?" Miriam shifted in her chair. "I didn't want you to overreact. Overreact to my son being injured. You tend to be dramatic about minor things. So you did tell Landon not to tell his father about the injury." Miriam realized she'd been trapped. "I may have suggested that you might worry unnecessarily by telling an 8-year-old not to tell his parent about being hurt." "Mrs. Dunley, can you think of any legitimate reason why an adult would tell a child to keep secrets about injuries?" Coleman stood to object, but Judge Hawkins waved him down. "I want to hear the answer." Miriam's composure was cracking. "Sometimes it's better to handle things quietly." "Handle what quietly? An accident? Or something else?" "I don't like your tone." "Mrs. Dunley, did you push Landon into the coffee table?" "No." "Did you call him stupid and clumsy?" "Children need to learn." "Did you push him?" "He was being careless." "Why did Landon say, 'Don't tell Daddy'?" Miriam's face flushed red. "Because he overreacts, just like his father. Everything is a crisis with them." The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Hawkins leaned forward. "So you did say it." Miriam seemed to realize what she'd just admitted. I didn't mean, you said, because he overreacts." "Because of what, Mrs. Dunley?" "Nothing. I didn't mean anything." But it was too late. She confirmed that she'd told Landon to keep secrets specifically because she knew Jack would react badly to learning the truth. The implication was clear she'd done something that warranted hiding. Jack pressed his advantage. Mrs. Dunley, when you told Landon not to tell his father, what exactly were you afraid his father would find out? Nothing. Then why the secrecy? I told you. He overreacts to everything. To his son being injured? Most parents would be concerned about their child's injuries, wouldn't they? Yes, but so his concern would be normal and appropriate. I suppose. Then the problem wasn't his potential reaction. The problem was what he might react to. What did you do to Landon that you needed to hide from his father? Miriam stared at Jack with pure hatred. I don't have to listen to this. Judge Hawkins intervened. Mrs. Dunley, answer the question. Miriam's voice came out as barely a whisper. I pushed him. He spilled juice on my carpet, and I pushed him harder than I meant to. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. In the gallery behind them, Jack could hear someone gasp. Jack felt a surge of vindication mixed with rage. And then you told him not to tell his father because you knew what you'd done was wrong. Ah, yes. Jack returned to his table, leaving Miriam sitting alone with her confession echoing in the silent courtroom. But Margaret wasn't finished. She stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, we have one final witness. I'd like to call Linda Garrett to the stand. A middle-aged woman in scrubs entered the courtroom. Jack recognized her as one of the nurses from Dr. Matthews' office. Ms. Garrett, please state your occupation. I'm a registered nurse at Pediatric Associates. I've worked there for 8 years. Do you recognize the defendant, Nora Riker? Yes, she's brought her son Landon in for appointments. Can you describe Mrs. Riker's behavior during those visits? Coleman stood. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, this goes directly to Mrs. Riker's knowledge of and complicity in the abuse. I'll allow it. Linda Garrett took a deep breath. Mrs. Riker always insisted on speaking to the doctor privately before Landon was examined. She would provide detailed explanations for any bruises or injuries we observed. Can you be more specific? Over the past year, Landon came in with unexplained bruises at least 4 times. Each time, Mrs. Riker had elaborate stories about playground accidents or falls. She was very insistent that we document her version of events in his medical record. Jack felt his stomach drop. This was worse than he'd imagined. Did these explanations seem consistent with the injuries? No. Dr. Matthews and I discussed it several times. The injuries didn't match the stories, but Mrs. Riker was so detailed and convincing that we documented what she told us. Did you ever question the discrepancies? Dr. Matthews tried to ask Landon directly about his injuries during his last visit, but Mrs. Riker interrupted and said he was too young to remember details accurately. Margaret walked to the evidence table. I'm showing you Landon's complete medical file, subpoenaed from your office. Can you identify these entries? Linda examined the papers. These are injury reports that Mrs. Riker dictated to us. She insisted on very specific language about how each injury occurred. And in your professional opinion, were these injuries consistent with the explanations Mrs. Riker provided? No, none of them were. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hawkins banged her gavel for silence. Margaret continued. Ms. Garrett, based on your observations, do you believe Mrs. Riker was aware that these injuries were not accidental? Objection. Coleman shouted. I'll rephrase. Ms. Garrett, when someone provides detailed, false explanations for a child's injuries and insists those false explanations be documented in medical records, what would you call that behavior? I would call it covering up abuse. Nora made a choking sound from the defendant's table. Jack turned to look at her and saw that her face had gone completely white. Thank you. No further questions. The nurse's testimony was devastating. It proved that Nora hadn't just failed to protect Landon. She had actively participated in covering up his abuse by falsifying his medical history. Judge Hawkins called a recess to review the evidence. Jack sat in the hallway with Margaret, trying to process what had just happened. She wasn't just covering for her mother, he said, still stunned. She was actively helping her. The medical records prove premeditation, Margaret replied. This wasn't passive negligence. Nora was systematically documenting false explanations for abuse injuries. That's conspiracy. How could she do that to her own son? Fear makes people do terrible things, but it doesn't excuse them. An hour later, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Hawkins had her decision ready, and her expression was grimmer than before. This case involves serious allegations of child abuse, parental failure to protect, and active conspiracy to conceal abuse. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I find the following facts. First, that Landon Riker was physically abused by his maternal grandmother, Miriam Dunley, who has admitted under oath to pushing the child and causing his injuries. Second, that Mrs. Dunley engaged in psychological manipulation by instructing the child to keep this abuse secret from his father. Third, that Nora Riker not only failed to protect her son from this abuse, but actively participated in concealing it by providing false medical histories and coaching medical professionals to document fabricated explanations for abuse injuries. Fourth, that Mrs. Riker subsequently engaged in parental alienation by making false statements designed to undermine the child's relationship with his father. Fifth, that Jack Riker acted appropriately to protect his child upon learning of the abuse, and that his concerns were legitimate and well-founded. Jack felt his chest tighten with anticipation. Therefore, I am granting full physical and legal custody to Jack Riker. Nora Riker will be permitted supervised visitation every other week, contingent upon her completion of parenting classes and family therapy. Relief flooded through Jack like a physical wave. Furthermore, the restraining order against Miriam Dunley will be made permanent. She is prohibited from any direct or indirect contact with a minor child. Judge Hawkins looked directly at Nora. Ms. Riker, I want to be clear. Any attempt to violate these custody arrangements or to facilitate contact between your mother and your son will result in the complete termination of your parental rights. Do you understand? Nora nodded, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Riker, I'm also granting your petition for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. This divorce is final as of today. Jack felt something inside him break open, not with pain, but with relief. It was over. That evening, Jack was helping Landon with homework when a phone rang. Jack almost didn't answer it, but something made him pick up. Jack! Nora's voice was small and broken. Can we talk? There's nothing left to talk about. Please, just for a minute. Jack looked at Landon, who was focused on his math problems. Hold on. He walked into the kitchen and closed the door. What do you want, Nora? I'm in a hotel. I can't go home. She's there and I can't look at her right now. Jack said nothing. I didn't know Jack. I swear I didn't know she was hurting him like that. You knew he was injured. You knew he was scared. You chose not to ask questions. You're right. Her voice broke completely. I've been choosing her over him his whole life, haven't I? Jack felt a flicker of something, not forgiveness, but recognition of truth. Yes. I don't know how to fix this. You can't. Not with me. I know. But maybe I can fix it with him. Someday. Maybe. But that's up to him, not you. And it's going to take a long time. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, Jack. For all of it. For choosing her. For not protecting him. For not being the mother he deserved. I know you are. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Jack thought about his son, who still asked about his mother sometimes, who still loved her despite everything that had happened. Kids forgive easier than adults, he said finally. But trust has to be earned back. And that's going to take more than apologies. I know. Another pause. Jack. What? Thank you. For protecting him when I wouldn't. Jack hung up without responding. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, processing the conversation. Then he went back to help his son with math problems. Later that night, after Landon was asleep, Jack sat on his porch with a beer and looked up at the stars. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe freely. His phone buzzed with a text from Felix. Heard about today. You did it, brother. How does it feel? Jack typed back. Like I can finally sleep. 6 months later, Jack and Landon stood in their backyard, looking at a small red maple tree they'd just planted. It was a beautiful spring day, and the tree's new leaves caught the sunlight like tiny hands waving hello. Why this spot? Landon asked, Jack looked at the corner of the yard where Miriam had once kicked Landon's soccer ball in the old maple tree, then screamed at the boy for making her break a branch. They'd had to cut down that tree. It had been diseased, weakened by the damage. I thought this would be a good place for new growth. Jack said they developed new routines over the past months. Landon saw his mother every other week at the visitation center, and those visits were getting easier. Nora was attending therapy and parenting classes, and she seemed genuinely committed to change. She'd even moved out of Miriam's house and into her own apartment, but Jack remained cautiously optimistic. Trust, once broken, took years to rebuild, and some things couldn't be repaired, only replaced with something new. Dad, Landon looked up at him. Can we stay here forever? Jack knelt down next to his son, both of them eye level with the small tree. In a few years, it would provide shade for the whole corner of the yard. In 10 years, it might be tall enough for a tree house. In 20 years, maybe Landon would bring his own children to play under its branches. As long as I'm breathing, Jack promised. Landon smiled and patted the soil around the tree's base. I think it's going to grow big and strong. I think so too. They stood there together in the afternoon sunlight, father and son, watching over something small and vulnerable that would grow into something strong and lasting. Something that no one could hurt or destroy or take away. Something that was finally, completely theirs